Okay, hi, hello. I'm Erica Granberg and I live in Stockholm, Sweden.
My name is Haize Hawke. I'm in Los Angeles, California.
Dr. Professor Sudha Reddy in India.
My name is Elke. I'm a midwife in Anchorage, Alaska.
My name is Hanna Freiwald. I'm originally German. I've been living in Guatemala for the last 31 years.
My name is Hannah Darlin and I'm Professor of Midwifery at Western Sydney University in the west part of Sydney, Australia.
My name is Debbie Engelbrecht. I live in South Africa.
I'm Cecilia Nakubra from Uganda, East of Africa. I'm a midwife for 7 years.
And I've been a midwife for 20 years.
I first got into maternal child health in 96 when I was living in Chile.
I'm living in Dimona, Israel, in the Hebrew Israelite community.
And it's incredibly powerful to witness the birth of a child and the birth of the family and the birth of the individuals in the room.
For me, it's the most wonderful, amazing, miraculous honor ever.
Our job as midwives is to be Sherpas, not usurpers.
For me, it's a sacred place, it's a secret place, it's a private place. And I have the honor of receiving these little babies.
I'm in the business of watching universes being created. I mean, there's no better job.
Hello and welcome to the Worldwide Midwifery Podcast. I'm your host, Augustine Colebrook. In this episode, we are focusing on California, specifically Southern California, and we have two guests. Gene Declercq from Boston University School of Public Health will be joining us in our research segment. Gene has spent a lifetime studying maternal child health. His recent work in examining maternal mortality and morbidity in the U.S. has emphasized the importance of a systems-level approach to improving women's health. He is part of a collaborative team that has completed 3 national studies and a 2018 statewide study of women's experiences in childbirth entitled Listening to Mothers. We are focusing on the Listening to Mothers California study. He was a technical advisor on the film documentary The Business of Being Born and a producer and presenter of Birth by the Numbers, a 20-minute video that examines outcomes associated with current U.S. birth practices. With student collaborators, he developed and maintained the companion website, birthbythenumbers.org, which provides up-to-date data on trends in childbirth practices and outcomes in the United States. He was a principal investigator in 2 NIH-funded collaborative projects examining child and maternal outcomes associated with assisted reproductive technologies. We are so excited to hear his perspective today. But first, we have the great honor of speaking with the Reverend Haize Hawke, a student midwife and spiritual counselor in Los Angeles in California. Haize is the proud mother of 3, a world traveler, educator, facilitator, and leader in her community. She facilitates sacred circles, coming of age and rites of passage rituals, and she delights in mentoring people, specifically to become activated, in-tuned, strong, loving, grounded, and powerful beings. After being a healer and attending births for more than 20 years, Haize is in the final stages of completing her clinical training in midwifery in order to sit for her NARM exam here in the United States. She believes, as do many of us, that peace on earth begins with birth. It's my great pleasure to discuss birth and all things midwifery with the amazing Haize Hawke.
I never even thought that I would have children. It wasn't something I was focused on. But when I got with child, I just knew that it was time and it was right, and I'm gonna do it, you know. And then I had no idea that I would want a midwife. Literally, I didn't think about birth or children at all. So at the time, I just knew I was into trusting the process, trusting my body. I believed in myself, and I believed that I should have everything around me that would support me having the birth that I wanted. And that led me to a midwife. And the midwife had a best friend there in town, and she asked if she could come assist my birth. And I said, okay. She said, I can help. I'm really good at it. And I said, okay, great. So she was there, and literally like an hour and a half into it, I was like, okay, what is this you're doing? Because you're saving my life. What is this called? She was so amazing. And she said, I'm a doula. And I was like, oh, what's a doula? And she explained it to me. I said, okay, so how do I do that? And she said, well, you're having a baby. I said, yeah, I know. But like, how do I do what you're doing? And I said, I'll write it down. And literally between surges, I was writing down what she did and how she studied and everything. And then 3 years later, after my son weaned, I began my journey and I studied everything that she studied, which I did not realize was leading me to midwifery. I took nutrition, I got certified in nutrition, homeopathy, massage therapy. What else did I do? Herbology. Like literally, I studied everything, and I went through this amazing program called, at the time it was called ALICE, that's the acronym. And all of that led me to desiring to become a midwife. Crazy, right?
That's awesome. I
like
love it.
literally
I love it.
nowhere. My friends who know me now, I mean, who knew me then before this, are surprised that, because I was a dancer and a theater person. I was I was all Broadway, baby. I was theater and dance. I was loving Alan Ailey. I was studying there. And like crazy that now I've just done this whole thing, but everything, all of it informs who I am right now as, this birth worker, this person who is there to empower women, and, men too, in the birth process.
Midwives stand at this threshold between the worlds, and I wonder if you could tell us what it feels like to welcome new humans on the planet.
It's one of the most prolific experiences. It's interesting for me too, in a way, because, I started off as a birth doula, as here now operating as a primary midwife, and also being a death doula. Like the whole experience for me, I just see the cycle. I see that first breath and understand that first breath and last breath are the same. And it's incredibly powerful to witness the birth of a child and the birth of a family and the birth of the individuals in the room. It's kind of the most surreal, mind-blowing experience that you can have, because you see the essence of life. You see that there's this portal. I always believe that when the birth mother is pregnant, she is becoming immortal, and then at the height of labor, she's immortal, supreme. And after the baby's born, she goes back to being mortal, kind of. But it's a very unique experience. I find that there's nothing else like it. I feel honored to be in that space and place where there is this beautiful chemistry of trust and transparency. And it's just, I don't know how to explain it. I don't know if that answers your question. It's just,
it's beautiful.
One of the most amazing processes ever. I bow down each time in reverence to the process, to the human body, to the birth person. Just like, oh, I can't believe I get to do it.
Welcoming that spirit who arrived is like, it's a spiritual experience.
Hugely spiritual. That's the only way I know how to do it too, so
yeah.
Some of my background and my training has led me to this, and honoring the spiritual aspect of it and healing whatever is there for the mother in their ancestry line, and really connecting with that baby and see that baby's purpose and process. It's amazing.
It is amazing. Well, so one of the things that makes midwifery, I think, so unique compared to the obstetrical model of care is this phenomenon of holding space.
Mm-hmm.
Will you tell us a bit about what holding space means to you?
Holding space to me means that you are providing a safe container for this woman to show up powerfully in her vulnerability, so that she can be raw, be primal. She doesn't have to worry about holding it down. She can just fly in the experience. It's basically setting the tone and setting the mood. It's honoring her process. It's allowing her to be fully expressed and fully realized. And that way, she can be fully activated in her birthing. That's what it means to me.
That's beautiful. So I feel like every midwife has like a thing, something that they're really good at. And sometimes it's because they keep having to experience that. And I wonder, what's your thing? Like, what are you really, really good at?
What is my thing? I feel, you know what I'm really good at? I'm really good at making people feel safe. I'm really good at it. I don't know how, but I'm really good at making them feel safe. And I'm really good at motivating them when they think they're done and they don't have anything else. Yeah. Yeah.
God, I love that. Thank you for that. Well, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about a little bit more about the culture of birth, and specifically like where you are located. So practicing in LA, tell us about what a typical birth is like in LA.
Ooh, okay. So here in Los Angeles, you know, one of the things that I really love about the midwifery model is that we are really, we really create an intimate space with, you know, our clients. And so a typical relationship is, you know, we have the same prenatal schedule as an obstetrician. Our meetings are about an hour long because we want to know the whole experience. We want to see what's happening mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And we want to build the relationship. And the only way we can build that relationship is, you know, through proximity. And so I love those prenatal appointments because we're really getting to know one another. We're building trust and communication, and it's really fantastic. So by the time we actually get into the labor process, we've got a relationship that's running like clockwork. There's a lot of trust, and there is the ability to see one another and breathe each other in. Perfect. So we do those prenatal visits. We do those, you know, we do all the testing, and we can do all this, the blood draws and everything else. And I also love that we combine it with well woman at the same time. So once we get into that labor process, I know their body, they know me, and then we just dive in. And so the only challenge that we really have in Los Angeles is traffic. You know, we're here trying to get where we got to go. And then, you know, say that there is a couple of mamas going, like trying to go or revving up. We've got to negotiate the traffic and see how we're going to do this. And it's just, that's the challenging part, but also the fun part. It's like playing Tetris, trying to figure out how to make it all fit. But by the time we get into the labor process, which one of the things I love about it is we are there, you know, we don't come early because we like to have the couple, the birth couple, really support each other and keep it nice and juicy and just let it marinate like that. They do better together before we come. And so then we come, and it's just like we just kind of ease in, like, you know, you don't want to come in abruptly. We just kind of ease in, like into a warm pool, and then we just kind of set up quietly, and then we're holding space, right? We're watching them and there to assist them in having the birth they want. We're just making sure everything's okay, but they're doing it, which is the most amazing thing ever. And then by the time, you know, the babies come, You know, everyone's rejoicing, everyone's, so happy. And we go about the business of checking mama, checking baby, cleaning up. And then the next thing you know, we're out the door. And I love this part because the couples are always like, wait, you're leaving? You're gone? We're done? This is it? And they look around, the house is clean and the pool's gone and we're gone, and they have a baby. It's the best thing ever when you get that text and they're saying, I can't believe we have a baby. And like, there's no sign of it around the house.
I love that.
It's the best
I
thing.
love that.
I asked Haize to tell us a little bit about the difference between birth in LA and around the rest of the country from her experience.
Los Angeles, and California in particular, is unique to birth in America in the sense that we really believe in home birth in a way that is supported, even though we only make up like 1% to 2% of all births, right? It's growing, and people are finding that we have a type of care that prevents a lot of complications in birth, and it's a type of care that people are desiring. They want more support, they want more empowerment, and they want to feel like they can birth the way they want to. And from my experience I grew up in the South, and I lived all over America because my dad was in the Air Force. So my experience in the Midwest is very much hospital birth oriented, and it's very much all the protocols happening, like where they go in, they definitely get an IV, they go in, they're definitely staying on the monitor the whole time, they might not be getting up. And here we really seem to have women who desire to be more in control of their births. And even in a hospital setting, they are doing intermittent monitoring. They are asking for no IV. They are telling them what position they want to be birthing in. And they're up and about walking. And a lot of times they won't even want to come in until they're really active. It's a difference in ownership that I've noticed around the country, especially like New York. I used to live in New York, and it's night and day. From my experience, it's night and day.
Haize has also traveled extensively in the world. She has some fantastic stories. Let's listen in.
When I was in Africa studying with the traditional midwives there and the hospitals there, we did both. Birth looked very similar in the sense of the process and the physiology of birth. The difference was the amount of stuff. In Africa, there's very little that you can use, but these traditional midwives, man, hats off to them. They are powerful. And the ones we met were like 90 something, who knows how old they're. I know that the oldest one was in the hundreds and the youngest one was like 70 something. And some of them couldn't even see, but they could see everything. Like one of the best experiences I had was learning how to see with your whole body. They really have such innate senses that they're like tuned in, and even though they don't have a lot of equipment, they had a lot of herbs, they had, sharp knives, they had the things that they needed, and the things that they needed were very few. And everything else they did with herbs, everything else they did with the tools they had there and the traditions that they were trained with. And when I was in India, the difference was that it wasn't what was it? It was not as intimate. In Africa, there was a community of women taking care of women. In India, it was very much just like the mother or sister or auntie, if that was, a home birth. But in India, also there's lots of centers that they birth in too. So they have a little bit more equipment. That's the same thing. They have a lot of equipment, a lot of drugs. Whereas Africa did not have a lot of drugs. They had to use herbs. If they had Pitocin, they were grateful, extremely grateful. If there was an oxygen tape, they were thrilled. Those are the things that stand out the most for me. Cuba was very no, there wasn't a lot of home births in Cuba. There was a lot of hospital births, but they were straightforward births. They didn't have to use a lot of interventions. There was none of that going on. Africa must have been like the most inspiring for me, but the most challenging, because there wasn't hardly anything, and we just have to figure it out, make do with what we had. And there was one incubator, and most of the time, no oxygen.
This is a listener-supported podcast. If you like what you're listening to and would like to hear more of it, please consider becoming a patron. It's easy to do. Worldwide Midwifery has a Patreon page. That's patreon.com/Worldwide Midwifery, where you can choose your level of support, starting at just $2 per month. Your financial support allows us to keep offering this content ad-free and allows you to contribute to our guest choices. If you would like access to our extensive show notes, including our research segment, there is a $5 US option. I asked Haize to tell us what she wishes the world knew about birth or midwifery. Here's what she had to say.
I wish throughout the world, definitely the United States, that women and families realize that they have the power to say no, that they don't have to, like I met a woman in where was I? Hong Kong. And we just were speaking, and she was telling I don't know how we got on birth, but we did, and she told me about her birth experience, and I mentioned, "Oh, I'm sorry you did that. You didn't have to do that." And she said, "What do you mean?" And I said, I don't know if we should have that conversation. I don't want you to feel like you were robbed or you did something wrong or anything." She said, no, because I'm going to have another baby. So what did I not need to do? And I said, well, all the things that are set up are not necessarily set up in the best interest of the birth mama. So you can question those things and see if you want them. You have the right to informed consent, and you have the right to autonomy, and she was floored and amazed, and then started recording me so that she would remember that she could say no to monitoring and just do intermittent, that she could say no to different drugs that she didn't want to have for herself or her baby, that they didn't have to bathe her baby right away, and just simple things like that. I just think that because in our culture around the world we trust hospitals, that we just agree with whatever they're saying to do without really owning what it is that they're saying that we should do. And I think that's the difference of home birth and hospital birth, is that a home birth, you're doing it. It's you, mama. You got this. And in a hospital birth, a lot of the mentality is that you're surrendering up your power to have somebody do it for you. And I just think that's the information I would love to have spread around the world, that you have more power than you think.
Will you tell us a little birth story?
Okay, I got a good one that just jumps to my mind. I swear I'm going to write these stories down and publish this book. I had a birth up in Topanga Canyon. And for people who don't know what Topanga Canyon is, it's like a hilly area of Los Angeles that's right by the ocean. So it's like a mountainous area. It's cliffs, lots of trees, dirt roads, and there's one way into Topanga and there's one way out of Topanga. And it was late at night. It must have been around 12:30 in the morning. And it was a very steep hill. And I had not done the home visit. So I was trying to find this place in my little car, driving up literally what seemed like an impossible steep hill. And I was like, I'm not going to make it. My car is going to go backwards. This is it. This is how it's going to end. But I finally made it up. And I get there and we're birthing in you know those old school silver streams?
Yes, Airstreams.
Airstream, the
Yes.
silver ones, right? This one was
Yes.
about from the 60s, 70s. And it was perched on top of this cliff. And there were goats everywhere and llamas. And they're frolicking all over the place. And I walk into this stream and this Airstream, and first of all, it's the size of a bathroom, right? Which, you know, midwives have birth in small places. It's very common. This is the size of a bathroom. There were like 7 cats in this small space, and they were all long hair cats. So there's hair everywhere. There's goats hitting, jumping, and ramming the silver stream. Mind you, the silver stream is on the edge of a cliff. So I'm like, this is it. We're not gonna make it. I can't sit down. I'm not drinking anything from here because literally it was the crazy. We literally stood up there and we stood and we didn't drink and we didn't pee. And we held on whenever those llamas and goats started ramming, and we're just like, it's okay. We're like, hurry up and have the baby. Hurry up and have the baby. I couldn't believe it. And we're talking a lot of goats. There were like 9 goats, and then there were baby ones, and then they would let them come in, and they would just dump right there.
Oh my God.
Goat poo is not. The whole thing was crazy. And I was
Home
like, I
birth is
can't
such
believe
a unique experience, isn't it?
every single time. Every single one is unique. And yeah, that was a good one. That was up there with my Motley Crue Metallica birth. That was the same. Yeah, it's right up there.
Yeah,
with the rock music and rockers hanging out. And
yes, you had one of those too.
I had one of those too. She was happy as that. She was in her element, and she just loved it. And I was like, okay, we can rock out. I like, Back in Black. Yeah, cool. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I was doing an interview for a couple once, and she was really on board, and the dad was kind of like, I'm not sure about this home birth thing. And we were talking and giving him answers and everything. And finally, as he's getting ready to go, he goes, okay, I'm for it, but I just have one request. Can we please not play Enya? And I was like, oh, I love it. The stereotypes of home birth in the US are so interesting. I feel like so many, there's like kind of two major camps. And one is like, I'm having a home birth because it's cleaner and safer than the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this whole other group that's like, I'm having a home birth because like it's dirtier than the hospital. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like your couple, like I can't bring my dogs or my cat to my birth. I'm definitely having a home birth. Or in this case, bring your goats to your home birth.
In the Airstream, now mind you, we're not touching anything because there's layers and layers of cat hair everywhere. And that's cool because that's their vibe, and they have the right to birth in their vibe. But she is happy. She is feeling powerful. He's so in love, and it was just really amazing. It was beautiful. We just had to wait for her. Like literally, we're just holding space. We're just like, whenever you're ready, we're ready. We didn't really unpack anything because, we unpacked things on top of our cases because we couldn't get it out of the sterile field. So
sterile.
Nothing was sterile.
Birth's not sterile anyway, but that's like a whole new level of not sterile.
It was a whole new level of not sterile. But, they were good. And that's what home birth is. It's the powerful aspect of it, that they felt great about everything that was happening. So while I'm waiting to fall off the cliff, waiting for her to start pushing, we're just kind of saying, okay, if something goes down, where are we going to put her? Where are we going to put the baby? So, we're planning strategically. And then she just decides that she's going to do this standing up. She says, it's time. She starts pushing. She's kind of squatting, but she's holding on to like where the sink is. She's holding on to that so she can see all the goats as they're frolicking past the window. Every now and then there's one peeking its head inside, and I had to block the door because I was like, because goat poop is it's pellets, like lots of pellets that fall out and roll. I was like, I can't. So I blocked the door, and then we just started squatting down with her to do this, and she did not push for a long time. She was so happy. She was just like, my baby's coming. My baby's coming. And we're like, your baby is definitely coming. You are doing a great job, Mama. And he's like, you're amazing. You're amazing. This is amazing.
Aww.
So maybe she pushed for 40 minutes, maybe. And she caught her baby. We were just there to assist. Baby was absolutely perfection. Color was great. Cry was good. Tone was amazing. Just like it was perfection. We couldn't have asked for anything better except not to go down that steep hill.
Right.
We still had to so we were there longer, because we had to make sure everybody's good, baby's good. We put them into their little cozy area afterwards, and she didn't need suturing. She needed nothing. It was just perfection. And we went over postpartum instructions and planned for when, one of us was coming back 24 hours later, and left them happy as pigs in slop.
Oh my gosh.
No
That's
pun
so
intended.
beautiful. It's so beautiful. And we make so much fun of like the really crazy scenarios in other birth stories on this podcast. We've heard some really amazing situations that midwives have done. And this is the brilliance of it. Like, it's not what I would choose, but it's what she would choose. And that's what matters.
And that's what powered her up and had that birth be amazing and beautiful.
And it not only provides for their like psychological safety, it actually is physically safer. We've seen all of these studies, like they get an infection from the hospital.
Right.
So it's actually physically safer. Right. I mean, we're immune to the environment we live in. Otherwise, we would be sick all the time. So the fact that she's healthy and well means that she is safest in her own environment, goat poop and all.
Exactly. And ultimately, that's what I was like, you know what? They have been with us for the entire 9 months, and they have not been sick a day.
Right.
They're fine. I said, so let me stop tripping. It's my whole judgmental thing. Let it go. And absolutely enjoyed the whole process after I got through my stuff. And then it was just there, just for the brilliance of her birth. It was amazing.
I love it.
And then creeped down that hill. Creeped slowly.
Yeah, creeped.
Just creeped.
Hopefully it was daylight by then.
It wasn't quite. It wasn't quite. I once I got down and was on the coastline, the sun was coming up. But it was still.
I know that drive. That's a beautiful drive.
Yeah.
It makes me think of that documentary Babies. Do you remember that? Came out.
I do. I love that.
Yeah.
Now I gotta watch it. It again.
It's an amazing film, and there's no narration, and it peeps into these 4 babies' lives from birth to about 18 months. And the juxtaposition between the baby in Mongolia who's fighting over bones with the dog and the San Francisco baby who's being shop-vacced by its parents to get every speck of dust off. It's so perfect. That's the kind of extremes that we support. And really, it's not about what it looks like to us. It's about what it feels like to those families.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all.
That's beautiful.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. Thank you so much. That's a really beautiful window into midwifery.
Well, it taught me a lot.
This episode of Worldwide Midwifery is supported by ClientCare.net. Transform your practice with the most complete and affordable EHR and midwifery practice management system available, so you can focus on the care that matters most. Designed for and by community-based midwives, they offer a free 30-day trial. ClientCare.net.
I'm Gene Declercq. I'm a professor of community health sciences at the Boston University School of Public Health, and I've been a researcher on issues related to childbirth and maternity care forever.
And what got you started on that? Why are you fascinated by childbirth?
Actually, I'm amazed that everyone isn't fascinated by childbirth. It's the richest area one could research, I would imagine, because it involves everything from physiology to psychology to sociology to economics to politics. So I find it an incredibly rich area to allow one to look at things from an interdisciplinary perspective, and it affects people's lives. And I can't imagine.
Massive way.
Yeah, I can't imagine what would be more interesting than that.
Yeah, I love that. Well, so you've been a part of a number of studies. You've been quoted many, many times in the media. I'm wondering, we're specifically focusing on California for this episode, and I believe you were a part of the Listening to Mothers California study. Will you tell us some about how that happened?
Yeah, the California Health Foundation has supported a number of notable efforts to improve maternity care in California. And what's happened is they've established the CMQCC, the California Maternity Care Quality Collaborative there, and have done a number of notable things, much of it with Healthcare Foundation funding. And in doing that, they dealt with a lot of the clinical issues that are problematic and have contributed to high maternal mortality rates, like putting out toolkits on how to deal with postpartum hemorrhage or eclampsia, for instance. The Healthcare Foundation, I think, very thoughtfully said, what's the next area we have to move to? And it's listening to mothers themselves about their experience, and not just from a clinical perspective, but from a life course perspective. And the best way to do that was to actually talk to, and more importantly, listen to mothers. And so they were in discussions with us. There's a small team of us who've worked on these Listening to Mothers surveys since the first one came out in 2002. And the person involved from the California Healthcare Foundation, Stephanie Telecki, talked with Maureen Corey, who has been the contact for these kinds of things for us over the years, and decided that they would be interested in supporting a California survey. And so one thing led to another. I mean, this is over the course of years. But thanks to the generosity of the Healthcare Foundation and the savviness of people like Maureen Corey and Carol Sakala, we're able to do it and provide some information that I think is useful to their campaigns in California. I think a few things stand out. One is the distinction in experiences reported by mothers by, among other things, race, ethnicity, and insurance status. And that the experiences that they have depend in part on who you are. And I think that's notable, because what we'd like to think of is we have a healthcare system where the only thing that matters is what your health status is. And what we found over the years is that what also matters to a great degree is the who you are and where you live and what background you have. And so, for instance, women who had private insurance were more likely to report the ability to make choices around things like who their provider was and what hospitals they go to, whether or not how they were treated in labor itself, in terms of being asked about their opinions on things and their ability to have choices in those situations. Likewise, we found relatively low rates, actually compared to our earlier surveys, relatively low rates of women reporting disrespect and abuse during labor. And I don't want to overstate the abuse part. It's mostly disrespect. Their opinions not being respected, not being asked about things. Those rates were low comparatively. We're talking in the single digits, but it was much, much more likely in the case of women of color than it was for non-Hispanic white women, for instance.
Indeed, and we're seeing this across all health metrics that racial disparities are quite staggering in the United States. And you saw that in your report as well.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes what research does is it confirms what you thought you knew anyway. Thankfully, sometimes it also challenges what you thought you knew anyway. But in this case, I think it was more confirmation of what people had suspected for some time.
So as a result of this report, well, actually, before we go into that, I have a quick question. Was there any survey questions or conclusions that could be drawn on experiences out of the system, community-based birth, like birth centers or home birth, or was this a all hospital survey?
Yeah, this was an all hospital survey. Over the years, the Listening to Mothers, the very first one was everybody. But since then, we've focused on hospital births, in part because it's a survey, so the sample sizes are going to be in the order of a couple thousand people. In California, it was 2,539 women. And what happens is if you look at home births in California are a fraction of a percent. They're relatively low, even compared to other states. And so what you'd end up with is maybe 20 people in the sample, and you can't really analyze 20 people. So there are two of the limitations we have in Listening to Mothers surveys are that we don't do out-of-hospital births, and we don't do plural births, mothers with twins or more. For that reason, simply the results would not give us enough cases to do any analysis with anyway.
So as a result of this study and the conclusions in this large report that were drawn, are you aware of what California is attempting to do with these results?
The Healthcare Foundation has done a number of outreach elements associated with this. So there's not just the report, but there's been a number of fact sheets and issue briefs that have been done in association with it. Webinars have been done with clinicians in California. And I think they use it as a sort of foundation tool when they go out and work on their advocacy in the state around changes. I'm amazed as an academic who generally just, pumps out research studies like other academics. It's nice to see people who can take those studies and turn them into products that would be more relevant to the larger public.
From your experience as a researcher for all these years, what do you think is next? What needs to be studied next? What are we not focusing on, specifically California, but even across the nation?
I think a couple areas. There's been a lot of emphasis on maternal mortality of late, with the identification of higher than expected rates of maternal mortality. And that's the sort of issue du jour, right? This is the one everybody is talking about. In point of fact, I think there's a larger question we have to deal with, and that's the death of women of reproductive age. What hasn't been noted in all of this is that the maternal mortality rate has gone up in the United States, and it's higher than other industrialized countries. That's been very clearly established. What hasn't gotten the same level of attention is the fact that the overall death rate for women of reproductive age is going up pretty rapidly, whether they're pregnant or not. In fact, the overall death rate for women between 25 and 34 has gone up by 23% between 2010 and 2016. That's actually going up at a faster rate than the maternal mortality rate is going up. And that's pretty much a function of both some mental health issues and substance issues in general. Wow. And we see that in maternal mortality as well. I'm on the Massachusetts Maternal Mortality Review Committee. I don't know if it's a majority, but it's certainly a significant, very significant proportion of our cases involve some issues of substance use. And so if we're talking about improving maternal health, one of the things we have to understand is we can't start trying to improve maternal health when women are pregnant. That this is something we have to, well, first of all, we have to improve women's health because women's health matters in and of itself, and not simply because they're pregnant and we want them to have a healthy baby.
Right. Isn't that such an important distinction? We've been so baby focused that somehow we've kind of almost lost the mother in maternity care.
Oh, that's certainly been a theme for a long time. The phrase putting putting the M back in MCH is sort of common use among public health people. And that's absolutely true. And so if we want to have healthier babies, one of the things we can do is have healthier women. Note I didn't say healthier mothers, healthier women. And so that they start their pregnancies in a healthier state. And that after they've had their baby, we continue to pay attention to their health. And if the only way you can justify that is to say, so they'll have a healthier baby next time, okay, we can use that. But the fact of the matter is, I think it's important that we do that simply because it's the right thing to do.
So what can folks who are listening to this, like, what are some on the ground things that we can do, that we can implement, that we can communicate, that we can talk about, that we can ring the bell about to shift this culture?
I think part of it is the extension of, and this sounds boring, but the extension of Medicaid, the expansion of Medicaid in states where they haven't expanded, it would be really helpful. But one of the other things we found is that in a number of states, what happens is this: they have a given standard that if you're below, the average is 133%. If you're below 133% of the poverty level, you qualify for Medicaid. If you're pregnant, on average, that goes up to about 200% of the poverty level. But what happens to women is after they've had their babies, that drops back. Now, usually within 60 days, that drops back. But one of the things we found is about 11% of the maternal deaths, what we're calling maternal deaths, are happening between 42 days and a year after the birth. And the argument that's being made is, gee, if we're going to track deaths out till a year after birth, maybe we should cover women at least out to a year after birth. And so one of the things that would be really helpful is policies that do provide that, to provide coverage, so that, again, if the best case is to help them with their next pregnancy, then use that. But to start to say, we need to keep people in the system. Oftentimes what we find when we review these maternal deaths, I don't want to focus just on that, but it's sort of the tip of the spear of the problem, is women who've been lost to the system. You know, they haven't had enough prenatal care after they've had their baby. Nobody pays much attention to them, and they're lost. And we should be doing that. At another level, start to think about alternative forms of care. There's been a great deal of discussion around doulas and using doulas more widely, not just in labor, but as home health care workers, in a sense, providing services to mothers during the prenatal period and in the postpartum period. And that does a couple things. One, it certainly just helps the mothers in and of itself, but two, it keeps them as part of the system. That if there are difficulties, the doulas / home health aides can provide a bit of peer navigation to them and get them into the services that they need. There's not magic to this, right? This is like good, basic public health.
Yeah, it's always interesting to me. Like it feels like that these ideas of home visiting nurses or doulas or home health aides, and you know, as a midwife for 20 years, it's always fascinating to me because it's like, that is midwifery. It's like, yeah. When are we going to discover that bringing the midwife back to doing the home visits she's used to doing, and the continuity of care and the full family, full spectrum kind of care is actually the solution? At least that's my perspective. I wonder what your thought is.
Yeah, no, I agree. And obviously the models in a number of other countries involve that, right? And are based on that. And we haven't adopted that model here. We've, as you well know, we've adopted sort of a risk-based model. And the problem with that is if it's so resource intensive that that you're spending all your money on high-end level 3 type hospitals with facilities, extensive facilities, that's fine, but not everybody needs that. And if we can take some of that money and use it to provide better prenatal care, to provide better community-based services, then everybody benefits.
I think so too. Yeah, I mean, of course, I have a vested interest in trying to move the United States towards the international model that is integrative midwifery care. And I think you're right. I think the payer source is going to be a huge part of it. If Medicaid is expanded and includes community-based midwifery care, I think we would see better outcomes and less cost. And that's proven out in Washington. They did a great study about the cost of community-based midwifery care, saving Medicaid something like $2 million over the first 10 years.
Yeah, well, the challenge is this, preventative care, this is always a dilemma we have in public health, right? Preventive care, if it's successful, nothing happens, right? That the goal is to keep something from happening, and keeping something from happening isn't anywhere near as dramatic as having a case where there is a potentially terrible outcome that you have saved, quote, saved at that point. Because then you can see the benefits of this immediately, right? It's on the face. That person might have died and now they're alive. That's wonderful. And I want a system that can do that. If we set up a system with more home support, helping women be healthier as they approach pregnancy, that will save lives too, but it won't be as clearly identifiable which ones were saved. There's nothing that magically says Jane Doe was saved because of that. But from a population perspective, we know that's exactly what's happened.
It's not sexy.
No, there's nothing heroic about it.
America.
Yeah.
Well, it is exciting to dream up the possibilities, but it is potentially equally as challenging to think of all the roadblocks. And this is one of them, is that we are a infographic, news entertainment kind of culture, and we like those catchy headlines, and long-term care is not exactly sexy, but I think the more we dream up these solutions, the more it seems to me that every really viable community supported solution, evidence-based solution, really is the basis of what has historically always been midwifery care. It's continuity of care, it's whole spectrum care, it's in the community, it's by culturally matched providers, so that you get that, what is now being called peer-to-peer support, naturally in the midwifery model. Do you see any other way that we could fast track the integration of midwifery care in this nation?
There's two pieces to that, right? One is the two types of midwifery we essentially have in the United States, between CPMs and CNMs.
Yeah.
And one would be and this varies by state, right? We're a federal system. So one piece of it is ensuring that there be appropriate regulations for CPMs in states, and ideally that at some point they start getting access to hospital care too, which would seem logical in many cases, but we're a long way from that.
Yeah.
The other is there's a lot of models that argue for more CNMs, and I would certainly support that as well.
Yeah.
We just need to set up educational facilities to provide them. We don't have enough, and we can't put out enough. When we say we need another 10,000 CNMs, if we're actually going to start having more integrated care like that, then if we're putting out 600 or 700 a year, that's a long way off. We have to have major increases in midwifery education in both contexts. And,
I agree.
And appropriate regulatory support in those various places.
Yeah, we're at 33 states that offer licensure for CPMs now, and I think there's 3 or 4 more that have just entered the legislature. And of course, the new Moms bill entered in this Congress, earmarking $15 million towards the education of midwives and creation of more schools. So those are 2 really positive pieces, but I agree. I think it's going to take some time.
Luckily, we're really young and we can wait this out, and all these things will be solved well within my lifetime.
I love that. Well, thank you again for taking your time to discuss these complex and very important issues with us.
I hope it helps. I hope it helps people understand a little more about how the system works and doesn't work.
For the last part of this episode, let's go back to Los Angeles and sit with Haize Hawke again, midwife, doula, and get her understanding and her perspective from working in the community with families in and out of the hospital.
I work in the community as a doula as well as a student midwife. So I am in the hospitals a lot. And I have to say that unfortunately, these stories are correct. They're true. And it depends on who I'm supporting too. So if I take in a couple of color, they're treated differently and the questions they're asked are different than as if I took in somebody who, appeared to be the all-American family, whatever that means.
Yeah.
They don't get asked a lot of things that my couples do. And I've actually, unfortunately, have been witness to Child Protective Services being called in a couple of times for only the simple reason that they were either not married and partnering together or they were of color, but both the times they were of color. So it's hard to fathom, but it's absolutely what is occurring here. Yeah.
Dawn Thompson, who's the founder of Improving Birth, has done a lot to raise awareness. And one of the things that she reminds us about is this need for true informed decision making.
Mm-hmm.
And in my perspective, I think that's kind of like the foundational dysfunction of our American medical system. Is there is this perception that doctor knows best. And this started maybe a century ago. And this perspective is still completely present. And on improvingbirth.org and VBAC Facts and these other really amazing advocacy websites, we're seeing these descriptions of birthing people refusing something simple as they should be allowed to. And like you're saying, being treated really, really terribly. There was a recent kind of viral post about a couple of color who had a baby in a hospital, and I'm not sure what they even declined. I think they were asking for a breast pump, and security.
That's all they were asking. Yeah, that's it.
They were asking for a breast pump, and somehow it escalated to the point where security was called, and this brand new couple were escorted out of the hospital with a brand new baby under threat. Like, how can it be that we've come to this place where people's basic humanity is ignored in favor of the system and habits and procedures and the way things have been done is more important than what is happening for that particular client?
Yeah, unfortunately, what we're seeing in the media that's going viral is not uncommon, and what it speaks to is just the way that women of color are not valued. I mean, I remember hearing the quote that the most disrespected woman in America is a Black woman. You know, and here we go. Here we see another aspect of that, and unfortunately that situation, which broke my heart, by the way, that situation is not uncommon, that if a woman of color says that she's feeling pain or that something's not right, or could she have the doctor come in so that she could ask the doctor a question, that they are immediately shut down or put in their place, quote unquote, or it is belittled and, pushed away like, no, you're fine. Okay, yeah, we'll get somebody in here soon. And that soon is hours later, as we found out with like Kira, hours later, right?
Right, or the Serena Williams situation.
Or Serena Williams, yeah. Thank goodness she knew her body and she was present enough to say, this is what I need. One of the things I admire about her is she knew exactly what she needed. She asked very specifically for the things that she needed to be checked and was still ignored. So it's not money. It's not visibility. It's not anything other than she was a Black woman, and yeah, we'll get there. Yeah, you don't know. How could you know? You're not educated. And that's the piece that we're really trying to bring into everything. We like you were speaking of Don Thompson, making sure that everyone is educated at the same level. What I find is that the families of color that I support are not given the same information. And that's why I'm still doing the doula piece while I'm getting this midwifery license, because we cannot have a dropout. We have to continue the education. They have to know their rights, to know what each thing means, to know the difference between an intervention and a complication, and to be informed so they can make a very educated, powerful choice in how they're birthing their baby.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just like,
yeah.
Don't get me even started.
Well, I kind of want you to get started. Like, I want to hear what you have to say. I want the world to hear how systemic and institutionalized racism is affecting women of color here in the U.S.
Yeah, I want them really to understand, because when we say systemic, they're not really getting it. But what we mean is it's ingrained in the very fiber of their training in medical school. Like, they're taught it. So we've got to change how they're taught. What we do know is that the midwifery care model does work. Why does it work? Because we're not just following a system. We're doing person-to-person care that takes into consideration all the aspects of this woman. The emotional, the physical, the spiritual, the mental, we take in all of it. The social cycle component, everything. And we look at them as individuals. So it's not a cookie cutter thing. We know how birth works, but we also know that birth is impacted from the filters that this woman brings into the room with her. So you can't just say, this is the way it's done. This is what's going to happen. Every woman's going to get this. Everyone's going to be treated like this. That's not sensible. So we've got to have a conversation, and it has to be done in proximity, because that's the only way it's going to change, that has them look at the training process, because there's no, there is a way, because this is what's happening, but I was going to say there's no way you could look at somebody and say they don't matter, but it happens all the time. And what drove me to want to do this work is that I believe in the model of midwifery care. I see that it works. I see that it prevents a lot, and that it brings women into their power and families thrive. And I want to say, without getting too, on that tip, but they don't want to see us thrive. They don't want to see families of color thriving. So what's the best way to do it? Make sure the kids don't happen.
Oh,
I mean, this is it's an ancient way that it's always been done. You want a country, you want a nation, you stop the birthing of families, you stop the children, they just die off, and then you can take whatever you want.
There's almost no words.
Yeah. Yeah.
The words that do come to mind are the desperate need for women of color to have providers of color. And this is something that you're working on. Will you tell us a little bit about the project that you're involved in?
I would love to. Okay. So the project I'm working on is called the NARM Prep Jumpstart Program, and it's for student midwives of color. And what we did as the Californians for the Advancement of Midwifery, which is called CAM, we set a goal, and our goal was to improve birth outcomes by supporting a pipeline for culturally matched midwives. Families that birth with midwives have improved health outcomes. They experience more respectful care and reduce health care costs, you know. So this was important that we could, you know, make a difference here, because we know that families experience barriers to accessing midwifery care. There's a shortage of culturally matched providers, a lack of awareness of their care options, and, you know, real and perceived reimbursement issues. So the education piece, again, is huge. It's important. So CAM is working to remove these barriers by increasing the number.
CAM is?
CAM is the Californians for the Advancement of Midwifery. There used to be California Association of Midwives, and we've changed it because we want to include community, because the community is important to this piece, but any piece that elicits social change, it takes the community to be involved. And this is very much a community project, because we want to remove the barriers. And by increasing the number of culturally matched midwives and educating the families about what the midwifery model of care is, and just to expand the access to licensed midwives for Medi-Cal beneficiaries. That's their right. They have the right for that. So we're really working hard on doing this. And what we have done, like I said, we've launched this new program, but it's been a long process. In the past 2 years, we developed strategies to increase access to culturally matched midwifery care. We have increased access to culturally sensitive care, which is really important because we've got a lot of trauma in the community. We've got a lot of stress we're talking about families and women who are just trying to survive and live day to day. So when I go to a client that's in what I call the landlocked area where there's no fresh food, there's no grocery stores that have fresh food, there's only corner stores that have canned food or processed food. So there's a different type of crisis and stress that these women are dealing with than, say, if I was supporting a family that's in the valley, right?
It's almost unbelievable. Like something like 60% of the country's food is grown in California. How is it that Californians don't have food?
Girlfriend, talk to me. I'm serious right now. Exactly. But it's happening. So a lot of the times I'm bringing food for a family because I want her to be healthy, to be able to do what she wants to do, you know, and it's also just educating them, not necessarily for this time, but to educate them for next time, you know. So right now, this is what you're doing. I know you've chosen this hospital to have your baby in, and I know you don't feel necessarily safe there, but we're going to do everything we can to enroll them into the vision of you having this beautiful home birth in a hospital, because they really, really, really ultimately want you to have a successful birth. That's what I say. Sometimes I'm met with an opposition to that, but what I do is tell them that. And that's my goal, is to have them feel so empowered that they can do that, and they can say what they want and say what they don't want, and they can stand up for themselves, and they can have a uninvasive vaginal birth that they feel great about.
No matter the location.
No matter the location.
Right.
No matter the location. Yeah, so this program, like literally we have been working on increasing skills and increasing the capacity of the student midwives of color. We have got professional trainings going and really pulling in all the tools. And what we've done is create this program that is for student midwives of color, created by people of color, for their people of color. And this program is aiming to improve access to culturally specific care for childbearing families of color by increasing the number of student midwives who can pass the norm. Because there's women of color, student midwives of color who are training and they go to schools, and that's a whole nother piece. But passing the norm has been the challenge. And so we created this program that will allow us to help them do that. And this program is CPMs, which is Certified Professional Midwives, and LMs, which is Licensed Midwives, excuse me. And ultimately, this program provides a vital mechanism for decreasing racial and ethnic health inequities. You know, we really are proud of this because it's the first of its kind. It's based on principles of racial justice and equity. It centers communities of color as leaders, partners, and recipients, of course. And it's for any student midwife of color. The Jumpstart program is going to deliver a culturally responsive test prep curriculum that's infused with community building and professional development activities. This is it's never been done, so we have created this pilot program, which starts in just actually next week. It's on the
it's around the corner.
Oh my gosh, it's next week. We've got some amazing women in here in front of the scenes and behind the scenes. We have really teamed together as a sisterhood. It is profound. It is activated. It is prolific. I am so proud of it. I'm so proud of them and honored to be amongst their numbers. It's going to change everything in the birth world. Once we've got all these women now ready to go and a whole bunch ready to come in after this. This is just the first. We're going to do it all over California. When we get that going, we're going to take it nationwide. It's happening.
Yeah, I was going to say it's just for California students right now, but then the expansion is planned. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yes, it's really exciting. I really want to applaud you and the whole team who's put this together. I happened to be just in Mississippi last week, and Tony Hill was there hosting a workshop of mine, and he's coming to teach, I think. And really excited about this process. And I joined forces in the fundraising effort, and so I will put a link to where folks can join my fundraising team to help support and sponsor student midwives of color through this process.
You have been amazing. Thank you so much for your support. It's been incredible what you've been able to do, and we receive it with so much gratitude.
Yeah, it's like obvious. It's the next step. If we're concerned about social justice and we're concerned about making the changes and dismantling some of this inequity, then we need more midwives of color. And in fact, when we look at it, there's less than 1% of certified professional midwives in the United States identify as a African American or Black woman. Less than 5% of CNMs identify. And of course, even in the obstetrical world, there are very few people of color in obstetrics. And so it's really vital in all professions. And I love what you're doing for the CPM pathway. Thank you so much for what you're doing. The last question I have for you is, aside from creating pathways for more midwives of color so that we can have culturally matched providers meeting the really drastic need for women of color, and specifically for Black women and African American women, what else is the next step? Like, for mamas or midwives or doulas or childbirth educators or nurses or doctors from around the world that are hearing about this particular challenge in Southern California, but also across the whole United States and in many places around the globe, people of color are still experiencing racism. People of color are still searching for autonomy, for truth, for respect, for sovereignty over their own body decision making.
Mm-hmm.
What is the most important thing? What's the first step? What can a provider listening to this, a birth worker listening to this, what can they do to make a meaningful impact?
You know what? I think that the best way that we can make an impact is to engage community. So I would say reaching out and having events that share the information. Not that we're preaching on them or we're hitting them over the head, but that we are enrolling them in the vision of what this can do for the community and how it can support a thriving community, a thriving city, a thriving nation, you know.
And by this, you mean midwifery?
I mean midwifery, but anywhere we have a unequal system, the change is going to be in the community. Anything that we want to implement as a change for the better that would benefit anyone is to, because listen, we can talk to each other. You and I are in the birth world. Where the real impact is from out in the community, getting somebody in some jeans and some high tops who's wearing a t-shirt of one of their favorite band to say, you know what, my lady's pregnant and she wants to do this. I'm going to support her. She has the right. It's her body. She can do this. They're the most powerful ones. So we can talk to each other, but it's really about getting the information into the areas that don't have access to that information. So reaching out, having community events. Sometimes it might not even be about birth, but sponsored by the birth community or sponsored by this, person, and it goes in sideways. But like really having a conversation to get these people aware of where their power lies, to say, oh, you know what? Support her. She wants a home birth. Support her. She wants to work with midwives. Support her. She wants a hospital birth, but she wants a midwife. Support her in having that experience. Whatever it is that she wants. Like if all the men stood up and supported the women, it would be a different story. But a lot of times, who throws in the towel first because of their fear and their concern because they're not educated are the men. So I'm saying that we get out to the communities, we educate, we support, we share our vision. I think that could have a really huge impact. Support your family, support the ladies, support your women, support, stand up, get educated, be there, be responsible. And they were shocked. They were like, oh, like they didn't even know, they didn't even get it. But when we put the statistics on, which I can't remember right now, on the table about how many times the woman said, okay, I'll get the cesarean, or okay, I'll get the epidural, it's because the birth partner was stressed and worried and scared and feeling disempowered.
Yeah, or the mother or mother-in-law.
Or the mother and the mother-in-law, yeah. We got to educate them. They just don't know. They don't know what a midwife can provide even, like women's wellness, contraceptive, none of it. They don't know any of it. When I share to people that they can see a midwife for a regular pap exam, they're like, what? A breast exam? What? Really? They have no idea. And that's our fault. We've got to share what it is we do. All of it.
That's exceptional.
That's all. I hope that answers your question. I don't know. I just went off on a tangent.
I love it. I love you. You're so awesome and inspiring, and I can't wait to freaking publish this because you're going to be like celebrity status. Like, let's be real.
Go on.
People are going to be looking up your gram and like, oh yeah, that's my midwife. I love you.
I love it. Thank you. I love you. And I love what we do. And I love when people seek me out. I love my returning people. It's just, we're blessed to do this as our calling. And I just want to make sure we take good care of it.